My hands were shaking as I stared at the monitor. The patient was crashing, and I was the only one who knew how to save him. But saving him meant revealing everything. Everything I had buried for 10 years. Everything I had run from. My name is Laura Bennett, and this is the story of how one emergency forced me to confront the past I thought I had escaped forever. I wake up every morning at 5:30 in my small apartment in Boston, Massachusetts. The routine is always the same. Coffee, shower, scrubs, and a 20-minute drive to Massachusetts General Hospital, where I have worked as a critical care nurse for the past decade. To my colleagues, I am reliable, skilled, and somewhat reserved. They know I came from the United Kingdom, but I never share details. I never attend the happy hours. I never get too close, because closeness means questions, and questions mean answers I cannot give. Boston is nothing like London. The accent is harsh, where British English was refined. The buildings are newer, the streets wider, the pace somehow both faster and more casual. I chose this city deliberately. It is far enough from my old life, big enough to disappear into, yet small enough that I could build a reputation through hard work alone. Every day I walk through those hospital doors. I'm grateful for the anonymity, but I am also terrified, because I know that one day, somehow, my past will find me. The fear never leaves. It sits in my chest, like a stone, heavy and cold. When I hear a British accent in the hallway, my heart races. When I see an email from administration, I panic. What if they have discovered who I really am? What if someone from London has tracked me down? I have built this life on a foundation of half-truths and carefully managed omissions. My nursing license is legitimate. My credentials are real. But the story of why I left, that is where the truth becomes complicated. That is where the lies begin. 10 years ago, I was a different person. I worked at Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel, one of the busiest trauma centers in the United Kingdom. I was 28 years old, ambitious and confident, perhaps too confident. I had just completed advanced training in cardiac emergencies, and I believed I was invincible. I believed I knew everything. It happened on a cold November night. The trauma bay was chaos. A major motorway accident had brought in 7 critical patients simultaneously. I was assigned to a middle-aged man with chest trauma. His vitals were unstable, dropping rapidly. The attending physician was overwhelmed with another patient and shouted orders across the room. He told me to administer a specific cardiac medication, but in the noise and confusion, I misheard. I gave him 10 times the correct dose. The man died within minutes. I realized my mistake immediately, but by then it was too late. The medication had stopped his heart. I stood there, frozen, watching the monitors flatline, knowing that I had just killed someone. The investigation began within hours. Hospital administrators pulled me into meetings. They reviewed the recordings, the charts, the timeline. The attending physician, Dr. Richard Ashford, claimed he had given clear instructions. He said the error was entirely mine. Other staff members could not confirm what they had heard in the chaos. I was alone, facing a negligence charge that would destroy my career and possibly send me to prison. I panicked. I could not sleep, could not eat, could not think of anything except that man's face and the sound of the flatline. 2 weeks into the investigation, I made a decision that would define the next decade of my life. I bought a plane ticket to the United States, packed 2 suitcases, and disappeared. I left behind my flat, my friends, my family, everything. I became a ghost. What do you think about what I did? Was I a coward for running? Or was I a victim of circumstances beyond my control? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for staying with me this far. I know this is not an easy story to hear, but I promise you, the best is yet to come. Building a new life in America was harder than I ever imagined. I arrived in Boston with savings that would last 3 months if I was careful. I had to navigate a completely foreign healthcare system, transfer my credentials, and somehow explain a sudden gap in my employment history. I told everyone that I had taken time off to care for a sick relative. It was vague enough to discourage follow-up questions. The paranoia was overwhelming at first. Every time my phone rang, I thought it was Interpol. Every time someone asked about my background, I thought they were investigating me. I checked news sites obsessively, searching for my name, for updates on the case, but there was nothing. It was as if I had never existed. The hospital in London had apparently closed the investigation quietly, likely to avoid scandal. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt hollow. I threw myself into work with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. I volunteered for every shift, every difficult case, every assignment no one else wanted. I became known as the nurse who never said no, who never complained, who always stayed late. It was my penance. I could not bring that man back, but I could save others. I could be perfect. I could earn redemption through sheer determination, but perfection is exhausting. I had no real friends. I went on exactly 3 dates in 10 years, and each time I found myself unable to be honest about basic questions. Where did you grow up? Why did you move here? What is your family like? Every conversation was a minefield, so I stopped trying. I convinced myself that loneliness was the price of safety, that isolation was necessary for survival. I told myself I was fine, but late at night, lying awake in my empty apartment, I knew the truth. I was not living. I was hiding, and hiding is not the same thing as living. Everything changed 6 months ago when Massachusetts General Hospital hired a new attending physician for the emergency department. His name was Dr. James Harrington, and the moment I heard him speak, my blood turned to ice. He was British. Not just British, but London British. His accent was unmistakable, refined, and precise, exactly like the doctors I had worked with at Royal London Hospital. I avoided him for the first 2 weeks. I switched shifts, volunteered for different units, did everything possible to ensure our paths would not cross, but a hospital is not that large, and eventually collision was inevitable. We were both assigned to a multi-trauma case, and I had no choice but to work alongside him. He was professional, efficient, and brilliant. He barely looked at me, focused entirely on the patient, but I could not stop staring at him, wondering if he recognized me, if he knew who I was, if he had heard about the incident. The anxiety became unbearable. I started making mistakes, small ones that I caught before they became serious, but mistakes nonetheless. I forgot to chart medications. I mixed up patient files. I snapped at colleagues who asked simple questions. My supervisor called me into her office and asked if everything was all right at home. I lied and said I was fine, just tired. But I was not fine. I was unraveling. I began researching Dr. Harrington obsessively. I found his publications, his credentials, his career history. He had worked at several London hospitals, though never at Royal London during my time there. Still, the medical community in London is small. He could have heard about the case. He could know people who knew me. Every interaction with him felt like walking on a tightrope. One wrong word, one slip of the tongue, and everything would come crashing down. I started having nightmares where he confronted me in front of the entire staff, pointing and shouting that I was a fraud, a killer, a coward who ran away instead of facing justice. The night of April 14th started like any other shift. I arrived at 6 in the evening for the overnight rotation. The emergency department was moderately busy, nothing unusual. Then at 9:23, everything exploded. A commuter train had derailed, just outside the city. The call came in that we should expect 30 to 40 casualties, with at least 15 critical injuries. All hands on deck. Every available staff member was summoned. The ambulances started arriving within 20 minutes. The scene was controlled chaos. Nurses triaging in the parking lot, doctors running between trauma bays, the sound of monitors beeping and people shouting and gurneys clattering down hallways. I was assigned to Trauma Bay 3 with Dr. Harrington and 2 other nurses. Our first patient was a young woman with a crushed pelvis, then an elderly man with a head injury, then a teenager with internal bleeding. The 4th patient changed everything. He was a man in his early 50s, unconscious, with severe chest trauma. His vitals were all over the place, heart rate erratic, blood pressure plummeting, oxygen saturation dropping. Dr. Harrington was examining him, calling out orders, when suddenly the man went into a rhythm I had only seen once before. A very specific, very rare arrhythmia, caused by a combination of chest trauma and an underlying genetic heart condition. I froze. The last time I had seen this exact presentation was in London, 10 years ago. It was the patient I had killed. That case had been unusual enough that it was written up in medical journals afterward. The condition was called Brugada syndrome, with traumatic exacerbation, and it required a very specific treatment protocol. Standard cardiac medications would not work. In fact, most standard treatments would make it worse. The patient needed an exact combination of drugs in a precise sequence, and even then, survival was not guaranteed. I stood there watching the monitors, my mind racing. Dr. Harrington was ordering the standard protocols. I knew they would not work. I knew this patient would die, just like the one in London had died. But if I spoke up, if I explained how I knew this, I would have to reveal everything. I would have to admit I had seen this before, that I had been involved in a case exactly like this, that I had made a fatal error. The seconds ticked by. The patient's vitals continued to deteriorate, and I had to make a choice. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, louder than the monitors, louder than Dr. Harrington's voice calling out orders. The patient's oxygen saturation was dropping, 70%, 65, 60. He was dying. He was right in front of me, and I was the only person in the room who understood what was happening. My mind was at war with itself. One voice screamed at me to stay silent, to protect myself, to let someone else handle it. I had spent 10 years building this life, 10 years staying invisible, 10 years keeping my secrets buried. If I revealed what I knew, everything would unravel. They would ask questions. How do you know this? Where did you see it before? What happened to that patient? And then the lies would fall apart like a house of cards. My career would be over. I might face legal consequences. I would lose everything I had worked so hard to build. But another voice, quieter but more insistent, reminded me why I became a nurse in the first place. I took an oath. I made a promise to do no harm, to put patients first, to use my knowledge and skills to save lives. This man had a family somewhere, maybe a wife, children, parents, people who loved him and needed him. He deserved every chance at survival, and I had information that could give him that chance. What kind of person would I be if I let him die to save myself? Dr. Harrington was preparing to administer adenosine, a common cardiac drug. I knew it would be fatal in this case. "Stop," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant, like someone else was speaking through me. "You cannot give him that." Dr. Harrington looked at me, confused and irritated. "Excuse me?" he said sharply. We were in the middle of a code. Nurses do not contradict attending physicians during emergencies, especially not in front of other staff, but I stepped forward anyway. "This is not standard cardiac arrest," I said, my voice stronger now. "He has Brugada syndrome with traumatic exacerbation. I have seen this before. The standard protocol will kill him. We need to treat the underlying arrhythmia first with isoproterenol, then address the trauma. If we give him adenosine, his heart will stop completely." The room went silent. Everyone was staring at me. Dr. Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Where exactly have you seen this before, Nurse Bennett?" he asked slowly, and there it was, the question I had been dreading for 10 years. I took a breath and made my decision. Royal London Hospital, November 2014. I was part of the team treating a similar case. We lost that patient because we did not recognize the condition in time. I have studied it extensively. Since then, every journal article, every case report, I know the exact protocol we need to follow. The seconds that followed felt like hours. Dr. Harrington stared at me, and I could see his mind working, processing what I had just said. Then, to my shock, he nodded. "All right, we will do it your way, but if this goes wrong, it is on you." He started calling out new orders based on my recommendations. The other nurses moved quickly, preparing the correct medications. I guided them through each step, my hands steady despite the terror racing through my veins. We administered the isoproterenol to stabilize the underlying rhythm. Then we addressed the chest trauma with careful, measured interventions. The patient's vitals began to improve. Oxygen saturation climbing, heart rate stabilizing, blood pressure coming up. It took 45 minutes of intense, focused work, but we saved him. When his vitals finally normalized and we could step back, the relief was so overwhelming I thought I might collapse. But my relief was short-lived. As the other nurses wheeled the patient to intensive care, Dr. Harrington caught my arm. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "My office, now." I followed him down the hallway, my legs shaking. This was it. The moment I had been running from for a decade. He closed the door behind us and turned to face me. His expression was unreadable. "I know who you are," he said. "I know what happened in London, and I think there is a lot more to that story than anyone realizes. By the way, where are you watching this from right now? I would love to know. Please write your location in the comments below. Your support means everything to me." I collapsed into a chair, all the strength draining from my body. 10 years of running, and it had all led to this moment. "You are going to report me," I said. It was not a question, but Dr. Harrington shook his head. "No," he said. "I am not, because I was there too. Not at Royal London, but I was consulting at Bart's Hospital at the time. I heard about your case, and I know Dr. Richard Ashford." He sat down across from me and leaned forward. "Laura, you need to understand something. Ashford was under investigation for multiple incidents of medication errors and patient endangerment. Hospital administration was looking for a reason to terminate him without triggering a larger scandal. When your case happened, they saw an opportunity. They pressured him to shift all blame to you. He claimed you misheard his orders, that you were careless, that you had a history of mistakes. None of it was true, but with you gone, there was no one to contradict him." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. "What are you saying?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of documents. "I have been investigating Ashford for years. He has a pattern of making errors and blaming nurses. After you disappeared, I started collecting evidence, statements from other nurses who experienced the same thing, incident reports that were buried. He has destroyed at least 4 nursing careers that I know of, maybe more." The room was spinning. "Why did you not come forward before?" I asked. He sighed. "I tried, but Ashford is well connected. He has friends in administration, influential colleagues, political ties. Every time I brought evidence to the authorities, it disappeared into bureaucracy. I needed something bigger, something undeniable. And then 6 months ago, I saw your name on the staff list here at Massachusetts General. I knew it was you. I have been waiting for the right moment to approach you." "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Now," he said, "we go back to London together. We bring all the evidence. We force a real investigation. We clear your name name and hold Ashford accountable, but I cannot do it without you. You are the key witness. Your testimony, combined with my evidence, would be enough to reopen the case and expose the cover-up. I felt tears streaming down my face. For 10 years, I had believed I was a killer, a failure, someone who deserved to hide, and now I was learning that I had been a scapegoat, a victim of a corrupt system. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Dr. Harrington and I met secretly every few days, going over documents, preparing statements, building an airtight case. He had collected testimonies from 7 other nurses who had been blamed for Ashford's mistakes. He had incident reports showing a pattern of negligence. He had emails between hospital administrators discussing how to handle the cover-up without attracting media attention. I also did my own research. I contacted lawyers who specialized in medical malpractice and wrongful termination. I reached out to journalist contacts who covered healthcare scandals. I even found the family of the patient who had died. His widow, Margaret, agreed to speak with me by phone. That conversation was the hardest thing I have ever done. I told her everything. I explained what happened that night, the chaos, the confusion, the fatal mistake. I told her about running away, about the guilt that had consumed me for 10 years. And I told her about Dr. Harrington's investigation, about learning that I had been set up. She was silent for a long time after I finished. Then she said something I will never forget. I always knew something was wrong with the official story. Richard, my husband, was a careful man. He would want the truth to come out, whatever that truth is. If you are willing to go back and fight for justice, then I will support you. Her words gave me strength I did not know I had. I also reconnected with my family in England. My mother cried when I called her. I had sent occasional messages over the years, just enough to let her know I was alive, but I had never explained why I left. Now I told her everything. She was angry that I had carried this burden alone, but she promised to stand by me. My younger sister offered to attend the proceedings with me. Even my father, who I had always feared would be disappointed in me, said he was proud of my courage. Dr. Harrington and I finalized our plan. We would fly to London together. We would meet with the General Medical Council and present our evidence. We would demand a full investigation into Dr. Ashford and the hospital administrators who had covered up his misconduct. It would not be easy. Ashford would fight back. The hospital would try to discredit us, but we had truth on our side, and that had to count for something. I am sitting in Boston Logan International Airport right now, waiting to board a flight to London Heathrow. In 2 hours, I will be on a plane, heading back to the city I fled 10 years ago. I am terrified, but I am also ready. I spent a decade believing I was a coward, someone who ran from her mistakes instead of facing them. But I understand now that sometimes survival requires retreat. Sometimes you need time and distance to heal before you can fight. I was not ready to face what happened 10 years ago. I was too broken, too scared, too alone. But I am not that person anymore. I have spent 10 years becoming stronger, more skilled, more certain of my own worth. I have saved countless lives. I have proven to myself that I am a good nurse, despite what happened. Going back to, London is not about clearing my name, though that matters. It is not even about holding Dr. Ashford accountable, though he deserves to face justice. It is about refusing to live in fear anymore. It is about standing up for every nurse who has been blamed for mistakes they did not make, who has been silenced by powerful people, who has been told their truth does not matter. I am done hiding. I am done running. I am done letting guilt and shame define my life. I do not know what will happen when I land in London. Maybe the investigation will go in our favor. Maybe it will not. Maybe I will finally get the redemption I have been seeking. Maybe I will face consequences I have been avoiding. But either way, I will face it with my head held high, knowing that I did the right thing, that I chose courage over comfort, that I chose truth over safety. So I ask you, what would you have done? If you were in my position, would you have the courage to go back and confront a past that haunts you? Would you risk everything you have built for the chance at justice and redemption? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you do not miss future stories. And before you go, check out the next recommended video. I promise it will surprise you just as much as this one did. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for not judging me too harshly. And thank you for reminding me that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth fighting for.